everybody, and welcome to Nerds of the Round Table, a show where we find and discuss the nerdiest news from the last week. My name is Jack, and I'm here with my older brother, Paul, and we'll start this week the way we always do. Hey, Paul, what have you been up to?
Hey, Jack. This week has been pretty busy, so I haven't played all that much, but I did play a few rounds of The Binding of Isaac, both
Nice.
on my Mac and using my little mobile controller. And I played a little more Watch Dogs 2. That's kind of a fun game to jump into and play around for a little bit. And then most recently I've tried a round of Ghost Recon Wildlands, the open beta. I think that's the name of it.
Oh, cool. How is that from your limited experience so far? Like, do you think it's going to be good?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty cool in that there's a very large open world. So, it is kind of like your more common open world game nowadays. But at the same time, the fact that you can jump in and play very specific missions with, in co-op or, with others is kind of a compelling experience, I think. So, I'm mildly optimistic about it. It's generally, I don't really like to play games online all that much. So, I'm willing to give it a shot and see how it goes this time around. What I will say is, though, it reminds me a bit graphically in terms, it looks similar to Just Cause 3. That's about the closest that I can relate it to in terms of graphic quality, the environment that they drop the player in, and the kind of the feel of the camera and motion. It's very quick. It's pretty tight. Very much in the vein of Just Cause 3.
Cool. Well, I mean, Just Cause 3 was well known for the random fun that players could get into. So if they can inject some of that into the Ghost Recon franchise, it could be a good time. So this week we are adjusting our formula a little bit just before I start getting into some of the things that I've been up to. We are going to be doing shorter episodes of Nerds of the Round Table, probably limited to 2 or 3, maybe 4 topics if we can move quickly through them, and limit our time to maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And we're going to begin doing these kind of single topic focused short episodes that we'll be calling Nerds DLC that will be released within the same week as the Nerds of the Round Table episodes. So you'll get one kind of earlier in the week, one kind of later in the week, and you'll get to hear us talk about some issues that Paul, you and I have discussed for like whenever we, especially the namesake of the show itself, DLC, is a topic that you and I have gone back and forth on a lot in the past. So the idea is to bring some of that to podcast form and hopefully bring you listeners into the discussion. Anything you want to add to that before I move on?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty exciting actually, because it's nice on a weekly basis to be able to talk about what's been going on during the week, any kind of updates, things like that, but then also have the opportunity to jump into single topics, as you mentioned, and really do a deep dive on one thing, right? Because I feel like during the week, the weekly update, we talk about a lot of different things, but to go in really deep on one thing could also be an interesting topic, or an interesting game, or an interesting movie that we like, and that's kind of cool. Yeah. I like the thought of being able to go deep into certain specific things.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it's way easier for you and me to find 2 20 to 30 minute segments a week that we can record rather than one long hour segment that we can record. Speaking of which, we are quickly running out of time, so I'm going to jump into what I've been playing this week, which is still Neo, and I still love that game, but I finally beat it. Now, Patrick Searles on Twitter was quick to remind me that there is a New Game Plus and that there's like an epilogue mission or two, which is very exciting, but honestly, Horizon Zero Dawn is on its way to my house as we speak, Paul, and I that is all I can think about at this point. So
yeah, no
I
kidding.
I loved Neo. I still love Neo, but I'm ready for Horizon.
I know.
And,
my pre-order on PSN, and I would say most people listening don't really know me, but you know me very well, and you know that my dislike of pre-orders almost rivals my dislike of DLC. But
I was gonna say pre-orders is most likely to be like topic number 2 of DLC.
Yes, exactly. So so my dislike of pre-orders mainly stems from the fact that publishers use it as a way to get people to purchase games before they've read the reviews. And the one thing I like about Horizon Zero Dawn so far is they've been very good about removing the embargo a couple weeks, or at least a week before the game was released, letting people get a sense for the quality of the game before they made that decision. So I made my decision today, and the preload, I think, is starting in the next couple hours in the US, so I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome, yeah, and not to spoil our discussion on pre-orders, but I actually feel very similarly, and I do appreciate the embargo being lifted with enough time for me to get my Amazon pre-order and,
yes, exactly.
and still get the game on Tuesday.
Yeah.
But I'm not the only one. We are not the only ones anticipating Horizon Zero Dawn, obviously, because the game has been getting 9s and 10s and 4.5s out of 5, like pretty much everywhere. It has almost been universally lauded so far, at least. Yep. And I don't know. I mean, we talked about it a little bit just now, but kind of like, what are you anticipating from Horizon? Do you think it's going to be like this revelatory experience? What are you expecting?
I think the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to with the game is just taking a well-rounded character and putting them in a very unique scenario that I haven't seen in a game before. That's kind of what I would describe as an ideal game across the board, right? And so from what I've read in the reviews so far, the character Aloy is very well-rounded, very well acted, very capable, very strong, which is especially great to see in a leading female role. That is awesome. I think there needs to be more of that. So I'm excited about that. And then certainly the second piece is putting them in kind of a world that is both believable and drives a good story. And from what I've seen so far in the reviews and in video, it looks like a very compelling environment and really could set itself up for a great story. So I'm looking forward to it. How about you?
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm definitely excited for Horizon, and the thing that actually excites me the most is something that you mentioned there, which was putting a character into, like, I guess kind of a completely foreign yet still believable world. And what the parallel I'm thinking of is actually The Witcher, where it's like, I understand fantasy and I understand like a strong character, and when you put a strong character into circumstances that I haven't seen before, like The Witcher has this very unique, kind of familiar yet not very familiar fantasy to it, because it is, it's European fantasy, but it's also specifically, like, I think it's Polish influenced, right?
Right.
So a lot of the monsters are like kind of like, oh, I've heard of a griffin before, but I've never seen something that looks like this, or I've never seen like a Striga or like whatever the different kinds of monsters they had in the game that I've heard the names of, but I've never seen. So it feels foreign yet familiar. And I think that what we're going to see in Horizon is something similar. You put this strong character in this world that we kind of know, kind of don't know. They have these machines that are, facsimiles of animals and creatures that we know of or that we've heard of, these dinosaurs or these like buffalo or deer or whatever.
Right.
I think that you have a similar kind of concoction there, and I'm excited to explore it. The future fantasy has always been more appealing to me than standard kind of fantasy. I know that's like a weird distinction to draw, but
I get it.
I think this is a little bit more up my alley, and I'm very excited to see what comes from it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it certainly seems like the reviewers are agreeing as well about the promise that the story has. You know, one of the things that people, including yourself, have been concerned about recently is the proliferation of kind of these open world games where there's just this kind of I don't know, complete lack of structure, or the story kind of wanders. But I think if they can keep the story tight, I think having an open world makes it more believable. I just hope they don't stray into allowing hundreds of different side missions that mean nothing, and all of those other trappings of typical open world games.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose we'll have a lot more to say about this next week when we both played the game some more. So why don't we move away from our anticipations of the game and start talking about some of the ramifications of its release. Now, there was a story that was released that was, printed. Printed's not a good word. Posted on Forbes.com.
Yeah, you can cut this piece out. I've got a couple.
Yeah, sure.
I've got a couple pieces to chop too. So.
Yeah. No, I'm leaving this all in. Fuck it. It was done by Paul Tassi, and the question that he poses in the title is the exclusive has. Well, I don't know. He just says it outright, but the exclusive gap between PS4 and Xbox One has become a canyon. I think that's more, that's obviously kind of a more subjective, like, opinion piece, based on what you care about in your exclusive games, which ones you're interested in. So that's why I think about it more as a question. And I would put that question to you. Do you think, Paul, that there's a canyon-sized gap between the exclusives on PS4 and the exclusives on Xbox One?
No. And I think I guess the metaphor doesn't even really make sense to me, because a canyon is wide. So, I don't know. Is he suggesting that? I mean, if he's there's a mountain. One has a low number and one has a high number, I guess. I understand what he's saying. What I would respond with, though, is I've read a couple articles by Forbes in the past, and they're very especially when they're from contributors, they're typically very hyperbolic. That's how you get the clicks. That's why we are talking about this story as opposed to talking about another story. So I would say he's being very hyperbolic, and let's be honest. I'm a big fan of the Xbox platform. I'm also a fan of the PlayStation platform. The Xbox platform, while improving, is still behind PlayStation, both in terms of consoles purchased and in some people's minds the quality of the games being delivered. So I think that gap, as he calls it, does exist a little bit, but looking at it, there are a lot of games that Microsoft releases that are huge draws for people. The Forza, or what is that?
No, you're right.
Forza Motorsports games, Gears, Halo. You may only be able to point to a few of them, but they're huge games for the platform. They draw huge sales. And you can only really say the same about the PlayStation, right? They've got Uncharted.
Maybe is
they've got Uncharted, and the same developer makes The Last of Us, right? So so they've got those two. They now have Horizon Zero Dawn and a few others like Bloodborne. Xbox had their the game from, oh, I don't even remember the studio.
Insomnia?
Yeah, Insomnia.
Sunset Overdrive.
Sunset Overdrive, that's the one. So each of them have their own style of game. And I think, I think there might be a gap, but it's not huge.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I agree that there's a gap, and I agree that there's some significant hyperbole there. I think that you're absolutely right in that is how you get clicks on the internet, right? That's everyone knows, obviously, but I think that on a personal level, I'm always going to prefer the exclusives on PlayStation over Xbox unless something drastic happens.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer Uncharted to games like Halo. I prefer The Last of Us to Gears of War, and I prefer Bloodborne to almost everything. I love Bloodborne, and Neo is also an exclusive on PS4 as of right now. I'm not sure if it's timed or not, but as far as I know, it's only there right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate the games on Sony's platform more, and that's why I picked up a PlayStation at launch. I knew that was going to be the case. But I don't know. There's a certain part of this that just seems a little mean, like to be a fan of one and to like call out and kind of slam the other for not providing enough when maybe it's just not tailored directly to you. There are people who are huge fans of Gears of War, and Gears of War alone is enough to get them to buy an Xbox One. I mean, two of the previous hosts on this podcast love Gears of War as a franchise more than almost any other game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to say that it's such a subjective statement that while I think the arrival of Horizon is adding on to that pile, I think it's a little too early to call it a canyon and basically count Microsoft out, especially when there's so much time left in the generation.
Yeah, and another way that I would look at it is, you may prefer the exclusives that Sony has as opposed to Microsoft, but you also have to look at the total game catalog as well as an important factor. And I think Microsoft has been doing an admirable job of bringing in indie developers and getting that movement going as well. They may not be exclusives to the Xbox. Some are on PC, some are even on the PlayStation platform. But I think they're doing a really good job of courting indie developers and building up that community. So,
not to mention backwards compatibility,
which is free, and I think it's pretty good. I'm gonna take a wild guess and say I know why you brought up backwards compatibility. Probably related to our next topic.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about with the Nintendo Switch as it's being released this week, along with some of its major titles like Zelda. A game that's being hotly anticipated by just about everyone. But one or two pieces of news have not been so hot for the Nintendo Switch. And the first one that we'll be talking about is the fact that the Nintendo Switch will not have Virtual Console at launch, which is a big blow to fans, but maybe it'll save you a couple bucks so you don't have to buy the same games for the fifth time. I might be injecting a little bit of editorial in there. But how does that strike you?
Yeah, well, I guess if you were to assume they were going to charge for the games like Sony did, but the alternative is they could do the same thing that Microsoft did on the Xbox One and let you play the games you've already purchased on the new console.
That is possible. That it could happen.
It's unlikely.
But they've charged you for every game on the Wii and the Wii U. And since they don't have like a unified online profile for each player, it'd be hard for them to track who's purchased what and what they should still have access to.
That's
which has been one of the big problems with Nintendo's online services in the past.
Huh. Yeah, they seem to have a very poor strategy around the network or Nintendo Network ID or Nintendo account.
Who fucking knows?
Yeah, well, they changed the name a couple times.
I always think back to this one editor at IGN Brian Altano, who has mentioned that I think he's purchased like Super Mario Brothers probably like 15 or 16 times through all its different iterations on all the different platforms on which they've released it.
Really?
Which, like, to me, I'm like, dude, you got to stop buying that game. But at the same time, maybe Nintendo needs to figure out a way to stop charging people for those games.
Well, if people are willing to buy it 16 times, why would they do that?
I suppose so.
You know?
So either this is a loss for fans who want to be able to play their virtual console games at launch, or this is a loss for Nintendo for not picking up those sales right away. But I thought I'd just bring it up, not to kind of like rain on Nintendo's parade as they launch this console, but does this give any credence to some of the chatter that this might be a console that was released a little too early? They don't have their online services ready to go until later this year. They don't have their virtual console ready to go. Their messaging has we haven't known as much about this console as we have about previous consoles. In as much as in advance. I know that's not a clean sentence, but you get it.
Yeah. Well, I've always liked to equate Nintendo and Apple, right? Mm-hmm. The difference being that when Apple launches a product, you find out a lot of stuff about it right away, whereas Nintendo tends to keep things under wraps. And, to some extent that helps the mystery builds the excitement around the product and things like that. But this is one of those scenarios where I think they made a mistake. So Sony and Microsoft said, absolutely no way are we doing backwards compatibility. Can't do it. Not possible on the Xbox One and the PS4. Right? Mm-hmm. And then they found a way to deliver it. But they said no up front. People were annoyed, but then the kind of the anger died down and people were able to. The
expectation was already set.
Exactly. Yeah. With Nintendo, they're kind of just, again, they're stringing people along, saying, "Oh, well, we'll provide an update. We'll share more information in the future." I think is what they said. So I don't know. I'm glad I'm not purchasing this console.
Same. It makes me think of this story that I'd heard about. One of the editors from Kotaku, I think it was, asked Nintendo reps like something like 10 to 15 questions at the Nintendo Switch press event, and they only answered like 2 of them.
Yeah.
Everything else was like, oh, we'll have an update later. We'll release details on this later.
Yeah.
And that was a month before the console was going to be released, right? And here we are at almost launch and finding out this week that the virtual console is not ready to go.
Yep.
But that's, we've talked about as much of that as we can. Although I'm sure we could complain a lot longer. But the other thing I wanted to get to about the Nintendo Switch was that someone, Game Explain, a YouTube channel, did a test of the Nintendo Switch battery. They played Breath of the Wild on max settings, and the battery on the Switch only lasted, I don't know, is it fair to say only lasted? It lasted, I think, 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
I'm not, you know a little bit more about the hardware side of things than I do. How does that strike you?
Well, they did say 2.5 to 6 hours in the.
They did do that
in the announcement, right? And I think they were probably playing or looking at Zelda when they made that 2.5 hours, and they probably realized, oh crap, that's a really short amount of time. So let's find something else and play it and hope that it gets a lot longer battery life. Oh, good, it gets 6 hours. So now the range becomes, hey, it's 2.5 to 6, depending on what game you're playing, right? Well,
yeah, if you play Tetris, you're good to go.
Yeah, exactly. So I am not surprised that the battery life is as proves to be as limited as they described it. I'm glad they were honest about it. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, so that's the thing. I stopped myself from slamming them too hard while I was introing this topic, because I realized playing a full console quality game on the go maybe expecting something, at max settings, maybe expecting anything more than 2.5 hours of in a battery, like for a battery that is still light enough to walk around with, is not unfair. Like maybe that is exactly what you should expect of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Maybe, yeah. But you can. I guess one point of comparison then is how long can you walk around with an iPad and play a game for?
I suppose. I mean, I don't really know. I guess.
Yeah. I would be curious to see comparison between the Switch and other tablet-based gaming devices, because I think that's a more appropriate comparison. Because right now we're saying, all right, well, reality is in line with what they said in their announcement, right?
Yeah.
But we haven't really seen much of a comparison between the Switch and another console. So I don't know. I think it'll be a fair comparison would go a long way in kind of getting a sense of how good this console is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, until we know more about what this console can do and what it can take while it's on the go, I suggest we move on to our next topic, which is just a quick story as we're running out of time. The BioShock's creator, Ken Levine, revealed his new studio, which is called Ghost Story. This is kind of a studio formed out of the ashes of Irrational Games, which they sort of burned down around them after the release of BioShock Infinite. Not in such a destructive way as I've described, but they did, cut a lot of the staff, and that game was not quite as well received as some of their earlier efforts, such as BioShock. But I wanted to read the quick press release that Ghost Story put out. As a new studio, we're excited to be working on our maiden game. Then they go on to talk about how they have pulled employees who have worked on System Shock 2, BioShock Infinite, all directed by Ken Levine. And let's see. This is where they talk about their game. We believe our new games will have a strong appeal to fans of BioShock. Our new focus allows us to craft experiences where the gameplay is as challenging as the stories. Basically, if you're the creator of BioShock, if you don't call out BioShock when you're talking about the next game that you're making, you're wasting tons of potential appeal, right? I mean, He has to mention that. So I'm willing to take him at his word there, but at the same time, like, I would be waving that around too if I had it in my pocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You got to have a careful balance, really, because you want to refer to BioShock as your credibility, but you don't want to. You also need to move away from BioShock as well, because that's not what they're producing. So it's a tricky balance of how often and in what context you say BioShock when you need the credibility versus when you want to differentiate the game. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, I sound cynical, but I'm very excited about what Ken Levine and his team can deliver. So I guess it's just one of those things we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I am pretty amped to find out what they've been working on, but I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think that does it for this week, unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, I think I'm pretty excited to, maybe do a quick recording sometime this week about maybe our initial impressions on Horizon Zero Dawn or some other topic. I think that'll be a lot of fun. I know this was kind of a quick, episode and a kind of hastily put together set of topics, but I think it's a good overview of the week, but I'm still looking forward to kind of jumping into specific topics to chat about. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. I think our new format is going to be pretty interesting, and I too am excited to see the kind of content that we can create from it. I think for a long time we've been focusing on how many stories we can get in a single episode, and this way we can focus on a few topics that we genuinely care about a little bit more, get the news out about them, get our opinions out about them. And then later on in the week, we can take a deep dive on some kind of topic in the industry or some kind of game that we're really into. I think this is going to be an interesting experiment. And hey, if it doesn't work out, we can always go back to what we've done before.
That's exactly right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that does it for this week. So thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for tuning in advance to the first episode of Nerds DLC. I can't wait to get that out to you. And follow me on Twitter at JackIsGaming. Follow Paul at PaulIsGaming. And make sure you follow all the updates from Nerds Online at Nerds Podcast. Let us know what you thought about what you think about our new format. Let us know if you feel like you're still getting all that you need to know from Nerds of the Round Table. And we do intend to continue listener questions. We just have to figure out where to fit them in. And this week it just wasn't possible. We're currently recording at 1 a.m. my time. And I am dying.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll say one more thing. If we were able to make shorter episodes potentially more frequently, I think the opportunity for people to get questions in and answered and, maybe focus, maybe we can put out a little information about the topic we plan to do a deep dive on and get questions specifically about that could be good. So I'm looking forward to seeing what other people have to say and have to ask as we kind of go into these different topics.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thank you all so much for listening and keep gaming.